We got a question from Joe from Galvanized. He said,
Shout out Galvanized.
shout out Galvanized.
Yeah.
How do you know that God is calling you to do something that is completely not in your comfort zone? So how do you know you're being called to it if it's something that's totally not within where you're comfortable?
I would even want clarification on, is this a big C calling or like just a small C, like an individual action?
What's big C?
Like big shift in your life, like a career shift, you're going to be an overseas missionary. Like, for example, most people would not be comfortable. It's not in your comfort zone to go live in the jungle in
Gabon.
Yeah.
I think
which is a place.
I think if you're feeling led to something, it's not your comfort zone. I think that's a great indication that is God calling you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jimmy and I, in our first couple years of marriage, we had 2 cross-country moves. Was not something I wanted to do, was not something that was on our radar, but we prayed, and Jimmy said, I think this is what God is calling us to do. And I didn't want to, but...
Did you pray too?
Yeah, we were praying.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't
I
let
thought
him
just
do all
Jimmy was praying and you
No.
were like, come on, Jimmy, what's he saying?
we were praying through it together, but he's the one that made the call and said, I think this is where God is leading us. And it was hard and I didn't want to do it, but at the same time I felt a peace about it.
Yeah, and that situation doesn't happen often.
No.
But Sarah and I experienced the same thing when I left teaching and we moved from Minnesota and away from all of our family to work in radio in Chicago. It was like we were praying that God send us wherever you want to go. And through a long story, but I'll make it very short, it seemed clear to me that the Lord was going to be calling us to Chicago and to leave. And Sarah said something along the lines of, if we weren't Christians, you'd be going by yourself. Because she didn't want to go.
Right, yeah.
But she felt God's calling in it. Like, who wants to leave all their family, take an enormous risk with 3 babies, and change careers?
Right.
And live in a city you've never lived in.
Yeah.
But there was a sense of, we got to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even explain why. In fact, did you have any people thinking you're crazy?
I don't think they would have said this, but I know my parents thought it was the right move because we were looking for something. I was looking for a job in my field, and I was not having any luck within, this region, let alone our state. But it was really cool how God set it up because this job I ended up taking at the time had no clue, but a friend of mine from college was working there. And so I got reconnected with her, became very, very good friends with her through this. It was a story only God could write.
Yeah.
Just the quote-unquote coincidences that lined up and allowed us to move down there.
Would you guys say that God's calling is, I would say more often than not, it's usually uncomfortable?
For
Yes.
sure. I would agree.
Like, he rarely calls you to, you know what I'm going to have you do? It's something that's really not hard at all, doesn't require much of you, and it's going to make you really rich.
Yeah. God's not going to call you something within your comfort zone because then you don't have to rely on him at all.
That's the key.
Yeah, that's it. The desperate dependence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like desperately depending on the Holy Spirit to give you what you need daily until you get your groove, in that groove where you're a little bit more comfortable. But like even at prison, like I'm never comfortable.
In fact, you didn't want to serve as the pastor of the prison campus.
I actually told the warden no.
Did you?
Yeah. And then we're in a meeting, and she's like, "Okay, this will be your office, and this will be da-da-da, and I'll give you keys to the prison." I'm like, I think I have to say, I may have to say yes to this, right? But I was and I'm still not comfortable. I'm not comfortable there.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that circumstance up because I think there are times, it's not often, but there are times when God doesn't give you a choice and it's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one of those like, I feel called, I think we're going to participate in this calling.
Or that there's like 4 options to choose from.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen often.
Right.
The Lord kind of used the warden to say,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, you're doing this, God.
Well, what was really interesting was we were supposed to meet with the warden in April, and it got shut down because COVID, reared its ugly head again at the prison. So she canceled our meeting, and we didn't meet with her until November. But I really felt like God was saying yes to this for me. So I actually resigned from men's ministry before our meeting, and I had to wait 3 months before our meeting with the warden. And I'm like, well, I really hope she still invites us because I've already said I've already given my role
Yeah.
to somebody else, right?
That was a little scary, I bet.
Very scary, super scary. So to answer the question, yes, I think, you know, if you look in the whole book of Acts, everything that they did, everywhere they went, everywhere God called them, even in the Gospels, they had to have been uncomfortable, right? I mean, they left a lot of their family behind, a lot of their jobs behind. They had to depend probably daily for God's provision, like from town to town. Like that's uncomfortable. Asking people, "Can I stay at your house? You know, can you also like feed us tonight?" Like those are all things that are uncomfortable.
And I'd have to say that sometimes his calling as well is uncomfortable because he's asking you to stay where you are, and you don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have ever had that circumstance?
Yeah.
I've had it happen to a friend. They really would like a different job, and they just can't find one. They're applying all the time, and they just cannot. They're not getting hired anywhere else. And so they're like, okay, maybe this is just where I'm supposed to be for now, for
Right.
whatever reason. And maybe I won't know that for a while.
Yep. There have been multiple times in my life where it was just got to be patient, and it was hard.
Yeah, and I had when Sarah and I were first married, I was a brand new teacher, and she was a police officer. Out of the gate, she's making more than me. And I was also in a band on the weekends. And so my dream was essentially she just rise through the ranks, literally, and I just play in a band on weekends. Very lazy, selfish vision for my life.
But it's cool.
Yeah, and I kind of started, and here's what it caused in me. It caused me to kind of take my thinking about my teaching career and just kind of be like, yeah, I don't have to worry about that all that much. I don't even have to like it all that much. And I would focus on some things I don't like about it. I can't wait to stop doing that. Well, as the Lord would have it, it's a long story, but her dad was a sergeant in that particular police department. And it made it very difficult when her dad was the boss for her peers to accept her.
Mm.
And I won't get into all the details, but I believed it became, and so did Sarah, a safety issue for her, where she was not getting proper backup in certain circumstances. And so she decided that it was very clear she needed to resign. Well, that threw off my game.
Can't be in a band.
Well, I could, but suddenly we shifted from
Yeah.
our plan is Sarah to be the breadwinner to now I am. And I remember I had to talk to God about it. I had to be like, listen, you're going to have to help my attitude, Lord, because I am not happy
This is
about
not
this.
what we discussed.
Exactly.
I told you what I wanted, and you didn't go with it.
And it
Yeah.
took me a series of months of leaning into the Lord to have him help me change my attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved what I was doing, and it ended up being great. And he called me eventually somewhere else. But yeah, his calling it's not going to be about you either, usually. Would you say that?
Yes.
Like some people are like, you know what God really would want me to do, what I want to do? I want to be the pastor because everyone should hear me preach. Wouldn't church be better if I was preaching? Because this guy up there, he's kind of boring.
Right.
This Scott guy, we don't like him much.
Right. His stories are terrible.
If God would just let me be the preacher, then everything, he's not going to hand that to you
No.
because your heart's in the wrong
Yep.
place.
For sure.
And you have no idea what it means to be a pastor
Yeah.
either.
It's not just preaching.
That's actually probably the smallest part.
Yeah.
In with us all morning, Pastor Scott Lessing from Grace Church, their prison campus at Lorraine Correctional. What's up, Pastor?
How you hanging?
Oh my gosh.
I'm doing great. In fact, I was thinking of your pirate name since you had an eye injury we
My
discussed.
pirate name.
And I think it'd be One-Eyed Scotty.
Yeah.
There we go.
I was thinking of Goonies,
Yes.
switch it.
Yeah.
You like that better than Scotty the Hottie, though?
Instead of gray beard, gray eye.
I don't know. What's the question that we're answering?
Are you trying to distract? We were talking about you. We're grateful that Pastor Scott's here. He's a friend of the show. And
Both eyes are intact.
Yes.
yeah, there they are.
Almost 100%.
He had a terrible eye injury. If you're just tuning in, you missed it. And you probably should be glad you missed it.
Yeah, you
because
really
it's
don't want to hear it.
Gross. There's a flap.
I wish
There's
I would have
pain.
missed it.
Yeah. It's 7:22. We're doing follow-up Friday, 440-546-2255. We got another topic by text. Would love to have you submit those. And I love this kind. It's because it's personal in nature.
Yeah, we have a pastor friend in Cleveland who has a teen son in 7th grade who feels disadvantaged because his friends at school are allowed to play video games for multiple hours per night, but he only allows 30 minutes usually. Can you give some advice for parents, us, as to how we redirect his energies beyond the sports we have him already involved in?
I don't think. First of all, thank you, Pastor. I'm not certain that you're going to be entirely happy with my response to this. Because I understand your heart and what you're doing, because we've talked a lot on the show about the damage that digital technology can do to one's life. But we were talking about a little bit off the air as we got this text message. It's difficult. There's a couple layers to this conversation, but the first one I'll just say is video games that I grew up with as a very young Xer. So those of you who grew up with Atari and Nintendo and Sega,
Sega, Genesis.
Video games today are nothing like that.
No,
Nothing.
it's not even. It's like a different world.
It's a different universe, really.
Yeah.
It's like comparing. I don't
The
even,
metaverse.
how do you even compare it? I can't even think of an
It's-
analogy because it is so different.
It's not comparable.
A car phone to your Apple phone.
Like the old big brick car phone. That's a good. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
To your iPhone, smartphone,
Yeah.
iPhone 16.
Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest difference in it, and you guys can help me on this, but it isn't any longer about the individual and the game. It's where people meet.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, my husband likes to game. He has some very dear friends that he's met online. Doesn't know them personally, but he would call them very close friends. It's also how he stays in touch with his brothers. He has 2 brothers. They're spread throughout 3 states. This is one of the only ways that they're able to come together in any meaningful way, is chatting through the games they play.
Yeah, it's very rare for my husband to actually play games alone. Like, he's not just sitting in our guest room playing on his PlayStation by himself. He's chatting with someone.
Yeah, they got the headphones on.
Yep.
A microphone on it,
Mm-hmm.
and they just talk back and forth while they're playing. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, I recall, this was years ago even, one of my older kids, we had just moved to Ohio, and he was struggling making friends as a little boy in his class. And we met with a teacher to talk about that. And she recommended we get an Xbox. Because she said that's where the little boys hang out after school. And so what they're doing is they're playing a particular game, and I don't remember which one it was, and they talk about it at school the next day. And so your son is not involved in that conversation because he wasn't there. It totally changed my wife and my perspective on this. Where now, particularly my younger kids, my older kids, it's not as much of a thing, but my younger boys, every night play video games with their friends.
Yeah.
And 30 minutes is not long enough for most games.
Oh yeah.
You're basically saying you can have 30 minutes with your friends a day outside of school.
Right.
I mean, I was the last kid in my class to get a smartphone. I did not get a smarphone until I was 17. And I remember missing out. I remember feeling very, very hurt and feeling very left out. My parents didn't know any better. They were a little wary of this new technology. I don't blame them. But I missed out, and that was hard.
That'd be like if you enjoy watching the Ohio State University national champions play football. That'd be like saying you can only watch 30 minutes of the football game.
I mean, it's
Right? Like you can't, like the next day you can't have a conversation with your friends because you don't know how it ended. You don't know all the things that happened within the game.
And to be honest, you're a little embarrassed in front of your friends because you're the only one whose mommy and daddy make them stop playing after 30 minutes.
Right.
It's akin to saying, when landlines were still the primary mode of communication to your teenager, you cannot use the landline except for 30 minutes.
Yep. I will say that Maureen and I, we did not let our kids do some things and had very limited time on their phones. And I think it kind of traumatized them a little bit. And it hurt them, And so if we were to go back, we would do it differently.
What would you do differently?
We would let them have more time on their phones, and we would let them have more apps on their phone too. Like we didn't give them I forget which one. It may have been Instagram. We didn't let them have that until way older, and that was a mistake.
Why?
Because they couldn't communicate with their friends. Because their
Exactly
friends
right.
didn't text. They communicated on Instagram or what was that? What's the one that you can't?
Snapchat.
Snapchat.
Yeah, I think they
You
couldn't do
so
Snap.
aged yourself.
I know. I know. I couldn't think of it right in the moment. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah,
I
the
kept
older
trying
kids,
to-
it's what's your
I'm like,
snap?
come on. Snap, yeah. So, but that really, our kids still talk about that.
Do they?
They're 19 and 20, almost 21. and they still talk like, oh, I remember when you wouldn't let us have Snap and blah, blah, blah. And all our friends would, and we missed out. And they're fine, right? But I think it did hurt them a little bit.
Oh, one of my boys, we were one of the last families to allow him onto Snapchat, I believe. And it got down to not only did he want to play video games with his friends, but we could see him get frustrated because he was missing on the meeting to play the games.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, when you're a kid, right? When we were kids, you want to hang out with your buddy, you pick up the phone on the wall in the kitchen and you call him and you want to go play, let's meet at the park, right? This is, you're on Snapchat, you message your friend in elementary school and you go, hey, let's go meet and play Gorilla Tag on whatever the game is. Or let's go play, what's the one everybody plays?
Roblox?
Roblox.
Minecraft.
Minecraft. Or there's the other one, the fighting one or whatever. But I sound even older than you now.
Fortnite.
Snapbook.
There it is.
Fortnite.
They time it, and it's team effort. And so my son, by the time he would find out they're there, it was too late. They didn't want him to play because he was too late to join the group.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah.
Wow. Sorry, I just made you feel bad.
No. I mean, it's
oh my
hard.
gosh, you're such a terrible.
Well, no, I know the catch-22 of it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Right now, the research indicates that social media is terrible for kids. And not being on it's equally as terrible.
Right. That's the struggle, right?
And so you're really
The
kind of stuck.
paradox.
Now, I would tweak one more thing, Pastor, and please don't hate me because I know you're like me and you're like Lauren and Ron and
Are you
Pastor
talking to me,
Scott.
Pastor, or that pastor?
This pastor. I was looking at you, but
Okay.
that pastor. You're doing the best you can
Yes.
with what you got. And none of us really know what we're doing. All we can do is tell you from our own experience. But what I would say is making your son busier is going to be equally as bad. I think our kids today are overscheduled.
Mm-hmm.
And as Dr. Kevin Lehman said in a book I had years ago, it's called "It's Your Kid, Not a Gerbil." and the cover was a gerbil running on a wheel.
Oh my gosh.
And I only read the introduction because
And they
that's
are
kind
busy.
of my life. And he spoke with a teenage girl who said, you know what I really would love to do, Dr. Lehman? It would lay in my bed and daydream, but I just don't have time. My parents have me too busy.
Mm.
What if your son was in maybe one activity and then there's certain days where you'd let him play video games with his friends online until he was bored? Because this is one of the weird things Sarah and I have done, and it's very unconventional. I recognize this. This is not a normal Christian thing. Christians often tell each other, here's how you solve this problem. Make more rules. You take the video game out of the house. You do a new rule for how long they can play it. I would say I've watched my kids, as Sarah and I kind of took a hands-off approach with some of them. They will eventually get bored playing the video game and stop.
Yeah.
And guess what? Sometimes it's only 45 minutes to an hour. But you've won something because you're not
Yeah.
embarrassing them in front of their friends.
Right.
And you're allowing them those connections. Have you and Eddie decided what you're going to do with your boys on this? Because they're not too far from wanting to play games online. I mean, middle elementary school,
Yes.
there's going to be little boys wanting to play with Trey on the Xbox or whatever he's got.
Yeah, we haven't discussed what we're going to do when they're older. I mean, right now we obviously have limits on screen time because he's 4.
Well,
So,
right, of course. Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
we haven't talked about it, but I know video games are important to my husband. It is how he stays connected to his family and to his friends. So if I were to assume, I think he would be okay with him being on video games if it means he's staying connected.
Okay. Yeah, and one funny one before the break. I've noticed a couple of my 2 younger boys are playing in much shorter bursts with their friends because the current fun game they're playing is called Gorilla Tag. I brought it up before. And it's through VR.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of VR they have.
And so you just like tag someone and you're done?
No. Your arms are your legs in the game. And since you have these sensors on your hands, you're holding them.
So you got to run with your
You
little
have
arms?
to wave your hands around in a running motion to move.
Oh, that's funny.
And
So he's getting exercise too.
Oh, I'm telling you, they will come up sweaty and exhausted. Well, you just went down there. Oh, yeah. Playing Gorilla Tag. I can use my arms to run. I'm exhausted. It's tiring and hot, sweaty. I think you saw that from our friend Jamie Buxton
Oh,
once
yes.
too, right?
I went to Jamie Buxton's house and she was showing us around her house. We go downstairs. One of her boys is dripping with sweat on the VR, like drenched. I don't know how long he'd been on there. that he was
Yeah.
whatever game he was playing, he
Working
was
hard.
working.
And I sometimes stand and listen. There's a certain spot in the house you can hear in the basement better where they're playing. And I listen to my boys laugh with their friends and scream. And they're having the time of their lives. Stop that. Turn it off. No, I can't do it. I don't think it's a good idea. But thank you for the question, Pastor. Hey, don't forget, subscribe to this channel so you never miss a new video. Like and subscribe. Slam the button. Whatever they tell you, just slam it. All right? Thanks.